You can buy a better pistol, install a red dot, upgrade the trigger, even switch ammunition. But if your trigger control is wrong, none of it fixes the real problem. That's why so many shooters spend years chasing tighter groups without ever realizing the mistake is happening every time their finger touches the trigger. Today, we're breaking down the trigger mistakes almost every shooter makes, and once you see them, you'll never press a trigger the same way again. The lie almost every shooter believes. The lie almost every shooter believes is simple. Accuracy comes from the trigger. It doesn't. Accuracy gets revealed at the trigger. Big difference. The trigger is the receipt, not the purchase. It shows you what your grip was doing, where your eyes went, whether your body was steady, whether your timing got greedy, and whether your brain was waiting for noise instead of watching the sights. That's why strong shooters can make an ordinary trigger look clean, and why expensive hardware so often gets blamed or praised for work the shooter is really doing. No, this doesn't mean trigger quality never matters. It means most people blame it way too early. So now we strip this down, one mistake at a time. Fighting trigger weight. A lot of shooters get obsessed with heavy versus light. Like that argument explains everything. They'll pick up a pistol, feel resistance, and decide the trigger is the whole problem before the first honest rep even starts. Mistake number 12 is fighting trigger weight. The shooter thinks this thing is too heavy to be precise or too light to be safe to run well. What's really happening is worse. The mind starts wrestling the trigger instead of controlling it. The finger speeds up, the hand stiffens, the sights get bullied, and now the shot breaks under strain instead of pressure. That's why a heavy-duty trigger can still be shot well, a double-action revolver can still print tight, and a clean precision rifle can still get yanked by somebody with bad input. Weight matters less than people want it to, because control matters more. Stop treating the trigger like an enemy you have to overpower. Learn what it needs, apply steady pressure, and let the sights tell you the truth. And that leads straight into the next way shooters lose that truth: the instant recoil enters the room. Letting recoil control your trigger. You can see this one happen before the muzzle lifts. The shooter isn't running the gun anymore. They're bracing for what the gun is about to do to them. That's mistake number 11. Letting recoil control your trigger. The shooter thinks they're just shooting faster, or working through a little flinch, or trying to keep pace. But then something subtle happens. Recoil starts setting the rhythm. The finger snatches the next shot. Timing gets choppy. Follow-through vanishes. The press becomes a reflex tied to the last bang instead of a decision tied to the sights. That sounds small. It isn't. When recoil owns your trigger, consistency collapses. Not because you're weak, because your brain is now negotiating with impact instead of observing the gun. The fix is mental before it's mechanical. The shot is not over when it goes off. Stay through it. See what the gun does. Recover with intention. If recoil is writing your script, the next mistake is where that bad script usually gets ugly. Trying to fire at the perfect moment. Crosshair touches center. Finger ambushes the trigger. Shot breaks, miss. That little sequence has wrecked more precision than most shooters want to admit. Mistake number 10 is trying to fire at the perfect moment. The shooter believes they're timing the shot with discipline, catching the exact instant the sights look ideal. What's really happening is a trap. The eye sees a flash of perfection. The brain panics that it's about to disappear, and the finger lunges to steal it before it's gone. Most shooters never catch this in real time because it feels deliberate. It even feels smart, but the movement is still abrupt, and abrupt pressure moves guns. Precision shooters don't hunt one frozen magic frame. They build pressure while the sight picture lives where it should, and the shot breaks inside that process, not on a desperate command. You don't win by stabbing the trigger at the center. You win by pressing through acceptable movement without fear. And once people stop ambushing the break, they usually get trapped by something they can hear. Chasing the reset instead of the sights. Some shooters become obsessed with one sound, not the bang, but the trigger reset. They treat that tiny click as the signal to fire again, focusing on their trigger finger while ignoring what the sights are actually telling them. The problem? The gun doesn't care what your finger feels. It only cares where the sights are. This mistake is common because chasing the reset feels advanced. But when your attention stays on the trigger instead of the sights, you're making decisions without visual confirmation. The sights reveal whether the gun has settled. Trying to surprise yourself. For years, people heard one line and built a whole bad habit around it. Let the gun surprise you. That's mistake number 8. Trying to surprise yourself. Beginners hear that and turn passive. They stop owning the press. They float on the trigger. They wait. They hope. Then the shot either dribbles out with no control or gets jerked the second patience runs out. The shooter thinks they're being disciplined because they're not slapping. What's really happening is they've confused calm pressure with mental surrender. A controlled press is not a mystery event. You should know the shot is coming. You just shouldn't be attacking it. That's the difference. Predictable break, unpredictable, exact instant. There's no contradiction there unless somebody taught it poorly. The trigger is not supposed to scare you, surprise you, or negotiate with you. It's supposed to obey steady, informed pressure. And once that misunderstanding clears up, the next failure gets brutally physical. Breaking your grip during the press. This mistake is deceptive because it rarely feels like a trigger issue. Instead, it feels like the gun did something unexpected. Many shooters unknowingly change their grip as they press the trigger. The support hand relaxes, the firing hand tightens, or the rifle shifts slightly in the shoulder. The trigger press may feel clean, but the shooting platform changes at the exact moment it should stay rock solid. Think of trying to keep a flashlight aimed at one spot while twisting it. Even a tiny movement can throw everything off. The result isn't a dramatic mistake. It's a subtle loss of stability that sends the shot off target. A good grip should remain consistent before, during, and after the shot. If your hands change pressure as your finger moves, the trigger isn't the real problem. It's exposing a grip issue, and that often begins with where your trigger finger contacts the trigger. Trigger finger placement. A 1/4 inch can make the difference between a clean break and a frustrating shot. Mistake number 6 is poor trigger finger placement. Too much finger pulls the gun sideways. Too little reduces leverage, turning a smooth press into an awkward poke. Many shooters think they just need more practice, when the real fix is adjusting where their finger contacts the trigger. There's no universal finger position. Flat and curved triggers, single stage and 2-stage designs, pistols and rifles all feel different. What matters is one thing. Can you press the trigger straight to the rear without disturbing the sights? Even experienced shooters overlook this. Familiarity breeds bad habits, and subtle changes in finger placement can cause unexplained misses. Before blaming the gun or your technique, check the simplest point of contact, your trigger finger. And the next mistake begins with what your eyes do just before the shot. Looking for the bang. Some shooters leave the shot before the shot leaves the gun. Mistake number 5 is looking for the bang. The brain gets impatient. It knows recoil is coming, so the eyes peel off the sights just before the break. Not by much, just enough. The front sight softens. The dot gets glanced at instead of watched. Visual discipline breaks a split second early, and that split second is where the truth lived. The shooter thinks they saw everything. They didn't. They saw up to the moment that mattered most, then checked out to wait for noise and movement. That's why called shots feel like a secret when people first understand them. Elite shooters aren't magicians. They just stay visually connected long enough to know where the gun was when the round left. If you can't say where the sights were at the break, you gave up information you needed. That's not just a vision problem, it's a trust problem between your eyes and your process. And once that trust gets shaky, another hidden error starts showing up earlier in the cycle. Ignoring trigger prep. The cleanest shots usually begin long before the trigger breaks. Mistake number 4 is ignoring trigger prep. Skilled shooters don't wait until the last second to think about the trigger. They manage it during presentation and sight confirmation, so the final press is smooth instead of rushed. Shooters who skip this often believe they're being disciplined, but separating every step until the very end can create a hurried finish. Trigger prep isn't firing early or compromising safety. It's understanding that a controlled shot happens in stages, with the trigger becoming part of the process before the final break. The shot should feel like the natural conclusion of good preparation, not a last-second reaction. Without proper prep, many shooters compensate with a sudden jab at the trigger wall, disturbing the sights at the worst possible moment. And that leads directly to one of the most common trigger mistakes you'll ever see: slapping the trigger instead of pressing it. This is the habit many shooters deny until they see themselves in slow motion. Mistake number 3 is slapping the trigger instead of pressing it. Shooters often mistake panic for speed, crashing through the trigger the moment the sights look close enough. Recoil anticipation and impatience turn a controlled press into a sudden twitch. For many right-handed shooters, this can produce low left impacts, though the exact pattern varies with the shooter and firearm. The real giveaway is the disruption. The front sight jumps, the dot snaps, and the trigger break feels abrupt instead of controlled. One rushed input can open groups and send shooters blaming their optics or zero when the problem started with the trigger. A proper press is smooth, straight, and deliberate. A slap is driven by emotion. If your trigger break feels like swatting a fly, the gun is exposing the habit. And the quickest way to catch it without burning through piles of ammo is mistake number 2. Believing dry fire isn't real practice. Many shooters waste hundreds of rounds chasing problems they could have spotted in minutes at home. Mistake number 2 is believing dry fire isn't real practice. Without recoil or noise, it exposes the fundamentals: trigger control, sight stability, grip consistency, follow-through, and draw technique. That's why top shooters rely on it. It reveals mistakes live fire often hides. Dry fire lets you see the exact moment your sights move, your grip changes, your finger rushes, or your eyes leave the target. Always practice safely. Verify the firearm is unloaded, remove all live ammunition from the area, and treat every repetition with purpose. Here's a simple test for your next dry fire session or range trip. Watch the sights through the trigger break and ask yourself, did anything move that wasn't supposed to? If the answer is yes, the trigger didn't cause the mistake, it exposed it. And that leads to the biggest trigger mistake of all. Thinking accuracy is about the trigger finger alone. This is where everything comes together. Mistake number 1 is believing accuracy depends only on your trigger finger. In reality, every shot is shaped by the entire system: your grip, sight focus, breathing, body position, balance, and follow-through. The trigger simply delivers the final input. That's why two shooters can use the same firearm and get completely different results. One maintains a stable platform and a smooth press. The other has a weak link, whether it's grip, vision, timing, or body tension, and the shot suffers. The trigger isn't the cause of most misses, it's the messenger. It exposes flaws in your technique instead of creating them. Once you understand that, missed shots stop feeling random. They become predictable, diagnosable, and fixable. And that's when real improvement begins. The shooters who make difficult shots look effortless don't rely on luck, expensive gear, or perfect triggers. They master the fundamentals behind every trigger press. They know the trigger doesn't create accuracy, it reveals the quality of everything leading up to the shot. So the next time a shot misses, don't blame the optic or the ammo first. Watch your sights, check your grip, and pay attention to the moments before the break. That's where most mistakes and the biggest improvements are found. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe, hit the bell, and share it with a fellow shooter. And remember, accuracy doesn't begin with the trigger. It begins with the fundamentals the trigger exposes.